I am amongst the failures of the vegan movement of the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I count myself as a failure
Sure.
in this regard. So I happened to meet somebody who was exactly how I would have wanted to make a difference in the vegan movement.
Right.
You're an intellectual.
Right.
You're able to get on camera, present ideas.
Right.
You're brilliant. You know, are able to influence people in a way that's not just, hey, I'm sexy.
Yeah.
You know, pay attention to me.
Right.
So, yeah, that, no, I am not like James Athey that way. I tried to make my own YouTube videos, and I knew I just could not perform the way that you did. I then, you know, just realized, okay, you know, I do have some things I want to say. I've said them on Instagram, and I looked at other people, you know, talking about their lives on Instagram, and yeah, it was just, in effect, you know, not doing anything to change anybody's lives. I don't think I influenced anyone to become vegan. I don't think I influenced anyone to do anything with their lives meaningful. And what I actually did with my life, I'm, you know, horrified, and it's pathetic. What I've done over the last 5 years, but definitely 10 years.
It's interesting because I don't think of what I was doing as courting social media fame at all. The other end of the spectrum is outright conspiracy. The other end of the spectrum is moving in secrecy, which from season 1 is what I said I wanted to do. From season 1, I was talking about conspiracy as the fundamental mechanism of social and political change. It has always been mystifying to me that human beings are unwilling to look back at the last 10 years and then pause, turn around, and look ahead to the next 10 years in whatever constructive, positive frame of mind we can muster. Ask, what now, what next? Surely, inevitably, with just a little bit of interest in analyzing what went wrong in the past. Tony Blair retired from politics. I sat down and wrote an essay, child though I was, about the last decade of Tony Blair in politics. I went to the library and took out the book he published with his pre-election promises. His promises of a new and better society. And then I looked at the track record of what he had accomplished, right? Nobody else did this. I searched. I never found one newspaper, one magazine article, or one like political science peer-reviewed journal article. At that time, I did not find anyone in the world who went back and read Tony Blair's book and then just asked the question, of the things he set out to accomplish, what did he accomplish? What went right and what went terribly wrong? Mm-hmm. Now, in case you haven't noticed, this recording comes from Canada. We just had a very dramatic set of elections in Canada. Our Prime Minister of approximately 10 years, not quite 10 years, dramatically and suddenly resigned, unexpectedly resigned, after giving us all a tax cut. Sudden tax cut, sudden resignation, end of career. Not one story! Not one news story on television, not one magazine article, not one newspaper article. I did not search, but I'm sure. I'm going to just make the crass assumption. You're not going to find one peer-reviewed political science journal or political philosophy journal looking back at what his promises originally were before he got into politics and simply, you know, what happened, what went right, what went wrong. So is it any surprise, you know, the vegan movement, this inability, it's a double blindness. You won't look backward and you won't look forward either. Nobody's asking the question, 2015 to 2025, what happened? 10 years. 2015 to 2025. What went wrong? And what now? What next?
2015. That is the year that I became vegan.
Ha! Wow, little did I realize.
Yeah. You know, what was right about the vegan movement at that time that introduced me to it?
Is this a rhetorical question, or do you actually want me to answer?
Can it be both? Well, you were vegan for a significant amount of time prior to that.
Yeah.
You know, me at 22 years old, seeing certain documentaries.
Yeah.
That was a period of time where somebody like Sorsha could record herself,
Sorsha Morava, definitely in the Where Are They Now file.
publish her video on YouTube, and get tens of thousands of views.
With no particular talent, intelligence, or charm. With all due respect to Sorsha.
Yes, but she was vegan.
That's right.
That was her claim to fame. That was her identity.
Yep. That was her whole act.
Yeah. That wasn't really necessarily what got to me.
Right.
You know, what got to me were the documentaries.
Yeah.
So today, in 2025,
Yeah.
what are the chances that somebody would be impacted by content like Sorsha's content? What are the chances that they'd be impacted by a documentary?
I mean, I can take that and turn it upside down and put it inside and backwards. You know, when you do studies about quitting tobacco, when you look at scientific, real hard scientific research about quitting cigarettes, quitting tobacco addiction, there's a statistical illusion that cigarettes have become more addictive with time. And the reality is, the type of person who finds it easy to quit smoking has already quit. Or even within the period of your study, they quit at the beginning, right? Like if you're mentally and emotionally capable of quitting, you find out cigarettes cause cancer, whatever it is. You find out cigarettes make it harder to walk up a staircase, whatever the things are that motivate you. You find out you want to quit, you want to get rid of it, and then you buckle down, you do the work, you quit, it's over, right? And the people who stay behind, the people who remain in the study, first they try one method and it doesn't work, and then they try another one. Those are the people who are most studied and most researched, and they become the next generation statistically. Even if a generation is 5 years, who knows, for the purposes of this kind of research. They're the people who are showing up in the studies again and again, are the ones who failed to quit after the fundamental news came out. I mean, there isn't really anything new. There aren't shocking new reasons to quit cigarettes. Everybody already knows what the reasons are to quit cigarettes, right? Even if you're lying to yourself about it. So this creates the illusion that cigarettes have become more addictive. In fact, they're just as addictive now as they ever were. So similarly, what if the effect of those documentaries, right? What if it's already been expended? What if it's a burnt match? What if it's a firecracker that goes off once? Just like sort of the first shocking news that cigarettes cause cancer. Basically, fundamentally, that cigarettes are bad for your health. It's much broader than just cancer, that the health problems caused by cigarettes, right? And then it's gone. Never. Now, I want to give a second example that some of you will relate to right away, and some of you will have no idea what I'm talking about. When the birth control pill was first introduced in Canada, I can say, there was a wave of hysteria that women were all going to become irresponsible and promiscuous. Right? Now, I mean this, I'm dead serious. Were women in the 1970s more promiscuous than women in the 1930s? Or the 1890s? Or the 1860s? Like, again, most people just haven't done enough reading. Very brief digression. I remember a critique of European research on prostitution in Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, that area. And the researcher, I believe he was a white American. He just said, look, this research is so biased. They would never say these things about Marseille, France in the same period. It's like the same, these shocking revelations you're presenting about whorehouses in Asia. Do you really think prostitution is so morally pure? In the harbor in France that these boats were leaving from on their way from France to Cambodia and Vietnam. Do you think that the same French sailors were paying for services that were so different on one end of the journey versus the other? It was just a brilliant comment that guy made, which, by the way, was not published. I was working as a professional editor. That was basically written on the manuscript. So it was for my eyes only, for me as the editor before this book went to press. Interesting. This is part of the revision process. Back in the old days when new ideas got printed on paper and people paid money for books, that's all gone now. This is 2025, not 2015. That's one big change in the world. Okay, my point is, there was this one moment of shocking reevaluation. How is sexual behavior going to change if women can take a pill to avoid pregnancy? Right? And it's never going to happen again. It's not as if now in 2025 we can shock the world into reflecting on this. And I've already stated with all due skepticism, really female promiscuity, even during Shakespeare's time. Okay, guys, really, if you do the research, what women were actually doing, even in ancient Rome, we've been reading about that, right? Sorry, female promiscuity in ancient Rome. The common pattern I've seen is a woman marries a husband 10 years older than herself and then cheats on him with a man 10 years younger than herself. It's not the only pattern, but, whatever. The reality of female sexuality in these societies, despite propaganda statements to the contrary. Okay, but there was a moment when people sat down in front of TV cameras and really talked seriously. How is the birth control pill going to change society? Oh, now suddenly we've all admitted to ourselves cigarettes are poison. How is this going to change society? And then it's gone. So yeah, I would agree. Around 2015, there was, frankly, a similar kind of wave of hysteria. There was a kind of moral panic. People were suddenly confronted with footage of what happens in a slaughterhouse as never before. You could have seen it before.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. You were seeing, and now everybody's seen it. Now the novelty is gone. Now all those facts are as universally known and as despised. I mean, it's just become part of the background noise of our civilization. Everybody knows the reality of abortion. Everybody knows the reality of air pollution. I mean, there's so many of these things, right? Everybody knows the reality of cigarettes, birth control pill, whatever. HIV, AIDS, you name it. It's not shocking anymore. It's not scary anymore. So, I mean, in a sense, those documentaries will be available forever. I suppose new documentaries like that are being produced today. I mean, frankly, we could just check that on the internet. I mean, they'd be hard to find. I'm sure somebody somewhere is collecting donations year after year to make another, shocking
expose.
Right. Vegan documentary. But nobody's shocked anymore. Nobody cares.
Yeah, and it is not as if the climate change catastrophe crisis has gotten any better in the last 10 years.
It's just ceased to be new. It's ceased to be novel. Right. Yeah, there could be another Greta Thunberg tomorrow. A teenage girl could sit down and throw a fit over climate change tomorrow, and it's not going to matter the way Greta Thunberg mattered at one unique point in history and never again. The novelty is gone. Right.
Okay, so you were talking about examining the last 10 years.
Yep.
So if that is the case, that it was akin to the introduction of the birth control pill, a moral panic.
But I'm also saying it's like quitting smoking. That there is a minority of people who are intellectually equipped, ethically equipped, emotionally equipped to quit smoking, and it's not a big deal. And they exit the study. They're not being researched anymore. That's it. They quit smoking. They're gone. Mm-hmm. Likewise, there's this minority of people. They are an intellectual elite. They are an ethical elite. They're an emotional elite. They get the message about veganism. and they hang up the phone. They quit eating meat, quit drinking, and that's it. They're also silent. They're a silent minority, you know what I mean? They're not making a lot of noise. They're out there, and I think they're far, far less than 1% of the population.
Yeah.
But there is this minority out there who got it, who don't think there's anything more to explain or analyze. Oh, cigarettes are bad for you? Done.
Yeah, I mean, I can, from personal experience, yeah, I understand. If you get something,
right,
you don't really need somebody to explain it to you.
Yeah. And they're not interested in watching another documentary. Hey, Melissa, tonight, do you want to watch another documentary about how cigarettes cause cancer? Hey,
yeah,
we got time. Hey, wipe my schedule. We are busy tonight. Just being honest, we have things. We're meeting friends and we're going to see stand-up comedy. We do have plans tonight, but we could cancel those plans to stay at home and watch another documentary about something we feel we already know enough about.
Yes.
I don't think I need to know more about how cigarettes cause cancer, right?
Right, okay, but unlike you, I mean, you understood the lectures, or however you received that information when you were young, that alcohol causes brain damage with every single sip, you know. Well, I think I received something similar to that in health class, but I did drink alcohol for a certain number of years until it dawned on me, until I frankly met you, and I thought, okay, this is possible. It's possible to live your life without drinking alcohol. You can just refuse. You can just say to your sister-in-law when she's begging you to drink at this wedding party, you can just say no.
No, so, I'm not retarded and I don't want to be. Therefore, I'm refusing alcohol.
Yes.
It ain't real complicated.
Right.
But what if you had taken that seemingly simple factoid about alcohol and manufactured it into a fundraising campaign on the internet, in which you asked people to donate money now so you could save the world, save the lives of unborn children, prevent car accidents, raise the average test scores of high school students and people in college. We could improve and regenerate our whole society by eliminating alcohol if you just donate now. See, that's what's missing. There's the relationship between the person and the problem, and there's the relationship between the person and the minority of the constituency that cares about the problem, willing to donate money to pretend they're solving it. So that's the loop veganism has been stuck in, 2015, 2025. You know, mutatis mutandis, every single attempt at a vegan movement, big or small, in this 10-year period, has been the same as Wayne Seong's Direct Action Everywhere DXE. Now, it's very important to rehearse the stages whereby DXE alienated the vast majority of its own supporters. Right? The early stage, they denied they had any leader at all. They were not the cult of Wayne Seong. They were not led by Wayne Seong. They had no leader. They were a leaderless movement. They used the Latin term acephalous. Acephalous just means headless, by the way. A movement with no head. No head and no tail. Everyone was equal. Anyone could start a chapter. I think these are all gone. It used to be, I remember doing this, you used to be able to go to YouTube and go through the graveyard of YouTube channels, because there was like a DXE chapter set up for every city. So there was like, I don't know, every city in Europe. There'd be DXE Hamburg and DXE Freiburg and DXE Nantes and DXE, like even like small cities. And there'd be DXE Tel Aviv and whatever. So briefly, you had all these volunteers working for free around the world who took the logo and took the name of DXE and this so-called decentralized, fully horizontal grassroots campaign. They use that term all the time. Horizontal. What does horizontal mean? Okay? Now, this is my reconstruction of the history. Anyone else who lived through it can tell me I'm wrong. The extent to which it was in fact a centralized vertical organization with leadership, to my knowledge, was only revealed because of sex scandals. there were accusations of sexual misconduct. And at that point, they said, we are a centralized hierarchical organization. This is the person in charge. This is the committee. This is who complaints get reported to. This is the law firm. And they hired a consultant and were bringing in outside experts to deal with these allegations of sexual misconduct. Put it that way. Now, guys, I researched these allegations of sexual misconduct. And they would be laughed out of the complaints department at Coachella. Okay? People go to protests together. People have romantic relationships. People fall in and out of love. I mean, I have seen so many attempts to dramatize and exaggerate the sex lives of the leadership within DXC, including Wayne Seong himself, including the girl with red hair. I totally forget her name. Red hair girl from DXC. You know what I mean?
I know who you mean.
Okay. Red hair, red lipstick. You know who we mean, audience. Let's go. Let's see if we're anonymous. I have heard so many attempts to dramatize and exaggerate these things. And it's just like, look, this is not a Buddhist monastery. Also, admittedly, not Coachella. Closer to Coachella than a Buddhist monastery. Like, it's just what the moral standards are people are applying this. But anyway, they had these sex scandals. And again, guys, whether or not you think these sex scandals should be taken seriously, you can look, look, even with Buddhism, Zen Mountain, New York. So what? Oh, this is not the kind of meditation retreat I signed up for. Well, what kind of meditation retreat did you sign up for, motherfucker? Like, what do you want? Again, Buddhists have sex too. Okay, guys, like, let's, I don't know what to tell you. When you go to a Swedish massage parlor, well, what level of celibacy are you expecting from her? When you go to a Finnish sauna, okay, and now when you go to a Vietnamese massage parlor, oh, that's different, huh? So I'm calling you racist. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying you're either racist against Vietnamese people or against Swedish people. It's your choice. So look, at that point, in response to sex scandals and swirling criminal allegations, the real financial structure and command structure started to be revealed. So that happened with one vegan organization after another. Guess what? There is one bank account with his sister's name on it. At the end of the day, the money is addressed to a particular person or a particular post office box. There is a bank account and one person has signing authority for it and not another and not you. And there is a chain of command and one person gives orders and another person follows orders and that's it. So this so-called fully horizontal acephalous organization, you, as a member of my audience, whoever you are listening to this podcast, you may feel that DXC alienated you either with something they announced in theory. They made a number of philosophical declarations that alienated some of their supporters, or something they did in practice. One of these stunts on the street, one of these protests that you felt was immoral. You thought, hey, I don't want my teenage kid going to jail for doing this ridiculous stunt. Okay, that's how you feel. But if you had been really a participant, if you had been close to the center, what alienated people was that they were excluded from power. Was that they thought this was a horizontal organization, or at least they thought there was sort of a large Congress of people at the top. There was a large Congress of people at the top sharing power, participating. Again, is every member of Congress equal to all the others? But you know what I mean. Like, okay, and they found out no. There's Wayne, and there's Wayne's sister, and there's Wayne's ex-girlfriend, and like, oh. And guess what? Not all chapters are equal. It looks like all the money is going to be spent in Berkeley, California. There's one colony, and some people are getting paid salaries, and you're not one of them. And some people, this was bitterly contested, some people get to upload their YouTube videos to the official DXC YouTube channel. You're not one of them. Other participants wanted access. They said, look, I remember this. I didn't know these people personally. People talked to me. They were like, They organized this event in Brussels, Belgium. And they said, look, we're DXE of Belgium or DXE of the Netherlands or wherever they were. We worked so hard on this event. We want, our film of it to be uploaded to the official DXE YouTube page. Doesn't matter. And at that time, did they think they'd reach 5,000 viewers? These are not big numbers, but they wanted their, and no, there's not, no. This YouTube channel is just controlled by a few people, this Instagram account. So even the social media element, the element of sharing the fame and sharing the spotlight, who gets to speak at the conference, who gets to be on stage, and who gets to sit silently in the audience, those classical hierarchical issues that they swore would never be a problem became the only and overwhelming problem for the participants. So I'm leaving out many different dramas that are instructive to study. The anti-vegan period, where they say, okay, what matters isn't veganism, what matters is animal rights. It's just all these ridiculous theoretical, philosophical, groping in the dark things. Oh, and there was this period of trying to cooperate with ignorant Christian fundamentalists, which it predictably backfires. The different attempts to cooperate with different kinds of people and alienate different kinds of people and denounce different kinds of people that came and went. Again, for some people in the audience, they'll remember one or another of those bumps in the road. But the road, is a multi-million-dollar failure. Over a 10-year period, we're not just talking about failure. We're talking about a failure with a bigger budget than most independent movies, okay? This is multiple millions of dollars that were raised in donations and squandered, and now it's gone. The big story here is they were founded with the promise, this time it's going to be different. Textbook New Era thinking. Mm-hmm. What People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals did, what the earlier movements of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, what the earlier movements of past decades did, that was doomed to fail. What we're doing is fundamentally different. And they have the scientific facts to prove it. Allegedly. Don't read the footnotes. Don't think about it too much. Just donate now. Blah, blah, blah. Instead, they reproduce exactly the same defects, exactly the same failures as all of the movements that came before, that they so briefly and listlessly, and they put so little effort into criticizing. There never was any profound probing critique of what the vegan movement had done in prior decades. There was the merest scant mention in passing that those methods hadn't worked. But what we're doing is new and different and is going to work. So donate now, join in, participate now. Right?
Yes.
Extinction Rebellion, same story. Every single thing I just said could be repeated for Extinction Rebellion, right? It has a vegan offshoot, Animal Rebellion. There are, how many other, 20 other movements in English? How many are there in other languages? The same broad pattern. And by the way, you might think, oh, well, he's exaggerating. I think all of those movements struggled with sex scandals, including Peter Singer and Peter Singer's sex scandal. Again, these questions about sexuality and what's normal and what's not, and who should be punished and who's pure enough. This was the story of the short century. That's what happened, and that's where your millions of dollars went.
Do you think that these organizations like DXE were trying to prolong something that was impossible to...
Oh, interesting.
Well, if you talk about this sense of moral panic, well, I understand the urgency I felt and maybe the impetus to radicalism when I was 22 years old and learned about the just reality of animal agriculture. I never resorted to terrorist activities. I never, broke into a slaughterhouse, and I never did anything like that. So
I remember an interview with a comic book writer, Alan Moore, and his period of fame was really the 1980s. I think he was still famous and active in the 1990s, say. I believe he's still alive now as an old man. And he just said, I'm sorry to put words in his mouth, but I'm paraphrasing here approximately. He said, look, this whole thing with superheroes, like, it only made sense in the 1930s. Like, we're, to use your word, prolonging. Like, we're making this huge effort to kind of prolong something in the culture. Its heyday is already, like, it just doesn't mean anything anymore. And it was just, it was a very simple statement he made. I'm not going to make it sound, it wasn't a long paragraph, but it's probably something he said 100 times before. His style, it made me think, this is not the first time he's made this statement. He's probably said this or said variations on it 20 times, 30 times. Maybe he goes to comic book conferences and says it all the time. The comic book character Batman was adopted from the fictional character The Shadow. And, The Shadow didn't begin as a comic book. These short novels, short stories that had a cover illustration and one or two illustrations in them, that some drawn illustrations to, like, during them to spruce them up. And, The Shadow became a radio drama too. There's one, okay, so you look at The Shadow and what The Shadow meant, then you look at the very first year of Batman and what Batman meant. There's a real argument here that this was already meaningless in the 1950s. This was already falling apart, And then, how did it get prolonged? In the 1960s, Batman becomes a farce. Batman goes into a period of self-parody, becomes a comedy. So most people will be aware that's the 1960s Batman TV show, which, by the way, also had a movie that was just titled Batman, but people will call it the 1960s Batman movie, which is a straight-up comedy, beginning to end. I mean, there's no ambiguity. That is self-parody, comedy, farce, beginning to end. So Batman has become ridiculous, by the 1960s. So I just say, I think, I wouldn't have mentioned here, but, like, the concept of struggling to prolong something, especially because it makes you money, right. I think that actually is a richly evocative idea to bring to bear on the veganism of the last 10 years, of 2015 to 2025. That, this was something kind of already obsolete in 2015 and nobody wanted to deal with it. Now, I'll ask you this. You may feel this didn't touch you at all, but you used to have kind of an Instagram addiction. So maybe this did, touch you more than I know. Like, I remember a conversation with, I believe, one of my Hungarian fans. If this person wasn't in Hungary, maybe they were in Estonia, but to my memory, Hungary or that part of Eastern Europe. And this person said to me, look, we had a pure animal rights-based vegan movement here that was about the suffering of the animals and the misery of the slaughterhouses and ecology and doing the right thing. And then this fashion of what à-bas-le-ciel calls lifestyle activism took over. And the whole movement, with all this money that had been donated to it, with the assumption it would be spent in the pursuit of this ethical and ecological paradigm, this money instead got put into bikini body, sexy
recipe books.
Yeah, right,
recipe
right.
ebooks.
The enjoyment of life, the lifestyle activism. Eat as much fresh fruit as you want, look beautiful naked. Have a second youth. That movement. So that is, that is also the story of the century, so to speak.
Yes.
A century cut tragically short, but that's also what's going on. And just no, on the one hand, there's an incongruous contrast between that and the carbon parts per million count. Here is the objective scientific reality of climate change: carbon parts per million in the atmosphere, and the body count, the number of dead animals and the number of people dying of avertible diseases caused by cholesterol. All the different body counts. That's still going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hear me out.
Do it.
Interested to hear your perspective on this. You and I, we've talked about how you grew up with this end goal of becoming a book. Not that you in particular felt that way. It's that people of your generation felt like the ultimate end goal was to be a book. Was
be a book
to,
on a shelf.
Yes. that this was how you make a name for yourself. You
Right.
publish. You're a published author.
Right.
So we've talked about the contrast. You know, you grew up with the written word,
Yeah.
you know, on paper.
Right.
As opposed to my generation,
Right.
I grew up with text on a screen.
Right.
And then
So I
images
just mentioned
on a
this.
screen, yeah.
Melissa is correct in a sense, but she's just overlooking my nihilism. No, I mean it's true, but I was also very, snide about this. My father had left behind books that he published from sort of each stage of his life. So, there's the period before he's a communist, and he published a few things in that period. Then there's the long period in which he's a communist, and there literally are books still on library shelves from that period, right? And then, there's his role as an art curator, an expert on art galleries and museums. There are books of that. So, each stage of my father's life, all of which are ridiculous, all of which can be scoffed at, right? But yeah, sure. I grew up around people at every stage of life, people in high school who did see their lives that way. And, you could say they viewed the world in terms of three classes of people. There are people who live a life that's worth writing a book about, and they write the book themselves. There are people who write about their own accomplishments. There are people who live a life worth writing a book about, and they leave it to others. Someone else writes the book. And then there are the masses who are beneath contempt. There are people who don't even make it to the bookshelf. Sure. So those were the attitudes I grew up around. I am myself a very nihilistic and cynical character in casting aspersions on this. But sure, you and I have talked for many hours about how today people are just not growing up with the culture of the book at all. They don't even have this set of cultural conventions to rebel against, you could say.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sense. So your book, Veganism, Future of an Illusion.
Right.
This is the condensing of what you've grown to understand about the vegan movement. And although that is not the end goal for you, having a book on a shelf with your name, I definitely get the skeptical,
right.
Attitude toward that, and saying that, there is more to
Right.
existence than, writing your book, right? Okay, so contrast that with my life, which is much more pathetic, in that I, saw you on YouTube, reached out to you, met you, fell in love with you, and then I was kind of, elevated to this status of being, the woman who's on camera with you without any effort, you know? So I was, in a sense, sleeping my way into this position.
Yeah.
So I definitely struggled with.
You could say you slept your way from anonymity to notoriety. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, looking back on it now, I see it with
Right.
more clarity and
Sure.
with more, criticism, and yeah. But certainly, I had this contrast between, okay, there are people like Freely the Banana Girl who are talking about veganism on YouTube. There are women like Kristen Leo that are talking about veganism, and they have their own kind of gestalt. They have their own kind of role to play. My role is to be supportive of à-bas-le-ciel. This is something that really meant a lot to me. And then I happened to be a part of it. And I wasn't really fully recognizing that my role was my responsibility, and, I created a sex scandal of my own, even though we didn't have an organization. It wasn't like DXE this way.
We had an organization of two people.
An organization of two people, and I still managed to ruin it with a sex scandal, which didn't actually involve physical sex.
No.
So, yeah, it involved this, internet-based life.
Yep.
And so I definitely did not grow up, thinking, okay, my route to importance in the world is through the written word.
Yeah.
I thought my route to being an important person or being a known person was what I saw on MySpace when I was a teenager. At the time, somebody like a musician could, post photos and post music that they've created. And then it became Instagram and YouTube, which was a whole other level of, just accessibility. With MySpace, you had to log into your computer. But with Instagram, it's right on your phone. YouTube's right on your phone.
Yeah.
So it's this way of being known, being an important figure, without having done any research, without having done any hard work, without having gotten a degree in anything.
But look, so it's wonderful that you are talking about yourself in the first person this way. For me, what you're describing, I would think applies very directly to James Aspey. So I remember James Aspey talking about this in a video where he was actually replying to complaints from the audience that he didn't do YouTube anymore, that he wasn't putting together, I guess, documentaries on YouTube or exposés or YouTube, putting effort into YouTube videos. And his justification, long story short, it's very similar to what you just said. He said, oh, well, now he just posts on Instagram. And, Instagram opens the door for him to, you've heard his justification.
Yes.
Use his life of glamour and wealth and leisure, use images of him swimming on a beach to potentially influence thousands of people, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So anyway, someone like James Aspey, I've heard him narrate that. I've heard him analyze his own decision-making process, how he shifted from one form of activism to another, how basically lifestyle activism and, the portrayal of his own life on Instagram, his sort of very dishonest autobiography, on Instagram, became his way to change the world and his way to have a kind of status and power and importance. All right. What's not clear to me is how that applies to you. You
asked me about
maybe you're a victim of exactly the same mentality, and I haven't.
You asked me about the role of Instagram addiction. So this is partly what led to this topic. Yeah. But additionally, I am amongst the failures of the vegan movement of the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I count myself as a failure
Sure.
in this regard. So I happened to meet somebody who was exactly how I would have wanted to make a difference in the vegan movement.
Right.
You're an intellectual.
Right.
You're able to get on camera, present ideas.
Right.
You're brilliant. You are able to influence people in a way that's not just, hey, I'm sexy.
Yeah.
Pay attention to me.
Right.
So yeah, that no, I am not like James Aspey that way, or at least I don't think I am, or I don't think I was.
Right.
It was that I was using that sort of what I was seeing on your channel. I tried to make my own YouTube videos, and I knew I just could not perform the way that you did. I just didn't have, as sometimes you say, he doesn't have the juice, right? Okay, so I just didn't have that capacity, that skill, those to have that influence that way. So I then just realized, okay, I do have some things I want to say. I said them on Instagram, and I looked at other people, talking about their lives on Instagram, and it was just in effect, not doing anything to change anybody's lives. I don't think I influenced anyone to become vegan. I don't think I influenced anyone to do anything with their lives meaningful. Right. And what I actually did with my life, I'm, horrified, and it's pathetic what I've done over the last 5 years, but definitely 10 years.
It's interesting because I don't think of what I was doing as courting social media fame at all. Like, that's not what I was doing or why during those years. And it's still not what I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. Two contrasting examples at opposite extremes. Opposite extremes when you're somewhere in the middle of this spectrum. There was a time 10 years ago, 2015, when Gary Francione would have been the single most important name in the vegan movement. Whether you loved him or hate him, whether you were his admirer or his critic, 2015, the abolitionist paradigm was dominant. And there were debates. People were asking whether or not we should come up with something better than the abolitionist paradigm, or questioning in what ways the abolitionist paradigm really was better than the welfarist paradigm or other paradigms that had come before. It wasn't an unchallenged position of power and influence. But yes, 2015, Gary Francione is at the height of his power, you could say. Mm-hmm. Several people have said to me privately that Gary Francione is wealthy, that he is probably a multimillionaire. Now, if you just look at his career, I'm not even speculating. He's not poor. I mean, obviously, he has been very successful and he's affluent. And, I assume he earned his money. Again, you can just look at the list of high-paid jobs he's had and his university qualifications. But whether he earned his money or inherited his money or played the stock market, I don't know. People who know him face-to-face say, whoa, when you get to know this guy has a couple $1 million behind him. So if that is false, I apologize. Please don't sue me. I don't think it's such a bad thing for people to say you're affluent. But Gary Francione is not poor. Mm. And this raises a very interesting hypothetical and pragmatic question. What do you do if you have $5 million? So I'm not asking how do you change the world if you are Sam Bankman-Fried with so much money that it cannot be measured in millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions. Sam Bankman-Fried was in a category of wealth where even estimating how much money you're talking about gets difficult. There's a very interesting question. For a period of time we all lived through, Sam Bankman-Fried was the single most powerful and influential person in the vegan movement. And it's likely, in the rest of our lifetimes, there will never be another person who is vegan with so much power and influence. It's a very interesting, it's much more than a footnote, right? Briefly, one of the wealthiest people in the world was vegan. And he also happened to be someone who was directly connected to the most powerful people in American politics. Presidents, congressmen, senators. This is a guy giving depositions at the highest levels of the federal government and connected to other major politicians around the world. I've seen a photograph of him with, former Prime Minister of England and former President of the United States in the same room at the same time. So this was a uniquely wealthy and powerful person. Okay, but we're not talking about Sam Bankman-Fried. What if someone like Gary Francione has $5 million? It's a certain amount of money that allows you to take certain amounts of risk. What if he has just $1 million? What can he do? What would you do? And sure, the question now is, what would I do? Right? So you see, but I'm just saying, even just in starting and framing it that way, all of this bullshit from, the Instagramification of the world, the permanent vacation, the lifestyle, it seems ridiculous. Anybody can take a vacation. Mm-hmm. A carnivore can take a vacation. A drug addict can take a vacation. Sobriety is a great example. I can't really get out here and promote sobriety through lifestyle activism that shows me swimming at the beach. Right. People who do drugs can also go swimming at the beach. Absolutely. I can't say, hey, and enjoy a sober lifestyle. But the point is, so the James Aspey freely lifestyle, this seems absurd compared to this. But look, this is the other. I said there's a spectrum. I want to mention the other end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is outright conspiracy. The other end of the spectrum is moving in secrecy, which from season 1 is what I said I wanted to do. From season 1, I was talking about conspiracy as the fundamental mechanism of social and political change. So some of you will remember this. Louis-Auguste Blanqui, even with Vegan Cheetah, solid entry in the Where Are They Now file, the activist formerly known as Vegan Cheetah, I remember sitting down and talking about the political philosophy of Louis-Auguste Blanqui. And more recently I've talked about examples from the American Revolution, and the writing of the American Constitution and how these things actually happened.
Yeah.
So, openly elitist, secret conspiracy as the basis of political activism and the pursuit of cultural change. And even like the making of the average science fiction movie probably began as a conspiracy in the sense a group of people got together and said, look, we gotta make this science fiction movie happen. Let's put it together, Like, all kinds of not so mysterious cultural products, begin with a group of people coming together, none of whom are expecting to make money.
Yeah.
They're doing this on some kind of charitable or pro bono basis. Say, look, this is a really great book. Let's do what we can to make this into a science fiction movie.
Yeah.
And probably because it has a political message or moral message or whatever. So that's the kind of spectrum I'm looking at. And then that whole permanent vacation world seems so ridiculous and scoff-worthy to me. And my social media presence was in large part me scoffing at it and criticizing it.
Yes, it was.
Right, to see who else I could collaborate with in
right,
projects
which I
right.
appreciate,
Yeah.
and I
Right. Right. But I think what you're saying is that although you were in my orbit in those years, actually you were much more of a victim of the Instagram mentality, than you wanted to admit yourself you were. No, I mean that seemed to be where you were going with this set of reflections.
Yeah, no, I okay, that was not like not like
yeah,
okay.
But no. Right.
Okay, so this segment of what you just said, you kind of started out by saying you were not trying to gain a followership. Yeah, neither was I. Didn't feel that way. My being in touch with you, I was in love with you. I wanted to meet you.
Right.
I was an admirer. Okay, yeah, I did that for love. I did that because I loved you.
Right.
And then it becomes, who am I?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's all that matters in the world, but
right.
Who am I if, who I was before is dead.
Right.
I've moved on to a different period of my life.
Right.
Who am I going to be? And we talked about it at great length. You and I
Sure.
talked about different careers, the different educational programs that we started, and
right.
Yeah. The whole story, Eisel, but well, in the absence of so in my failure, in my career, in my education, in anything, well, at least, I was vegan, and at least I had this sort of role as being the woman on camera with Eisel Mazar, with, the face of à-bas-le-ciel.
Right.
This is something that's meaningful to me. But I see, holy shit, I am like all the other people that Eisel has criticized in that I squandered this amazing opportunity. So, and, when you talk about analyzing the last 10 years, broadly speaking, of veganism, yes, I'm counting myself as a failure. And I also am seeing that, the people that you were criticizing for squandering their opportunities, they are, Erin Janis. Okay, she squandered her opportunity. She had the opportunity of a lifetime handed to her. She was a beautiful young woman who was able to, play guitar, sing, and, make YouTube videos about veganism. And ultimately she's ended up ex-vegan,
Yeah.
in and out of psychiatric facilities, just not being able to accomplish anything with her life. And that's very sad, It's just reflecting on all these people and how I'm no better than them. I feel like, I'm not ex-vegan at least, but that is how I'm seeing it that way. Okay, so
I just want to throw in another person who squandered all their opportunities is Cosmic Skeptic. So Cosmic Skeptic, now known as Alex O'Connor, he's still famous. He's still successful.
Yes.
And yet, nevertheless, this same kind of critique applies to him. So I was just going to throw that in, that failure, in this sense, doesn't always mean that you disappear from the public eye. Doesn't always mean you lose your social media following. But yeah, Erin Janis and Cosmic Skeptic are two counterposed examples of this kind of failure. Go on. You're talking about
okay, so you're talking about, conspiracy, and you were talking about having $5 million. What do you do with $5 million? Well, I used to think the part of the goal was to convince people they should stop eating meat. If you can convince more people to do that, that will dramatically reduce, the impact on the environment, that'll dramatically reduce the amount of harm that we're doing to animals.
Right.
So yes, that was the ultimate goal. No, I don't particularly have a desire just to be known or
Right.
to be famous, but sure, I'm a human being that doesn't want to die without having done anything or accomplished anything. So yeah, I'm saying like the Instagram was a part of that. I didn't do very well with YouTube on my own. So Instagram was something that I could, take a nice picture and then put some text underneath it. Yes, it did take up way too much time and ultimately accomplished nothing. It's not that I was like James Aspian thinking, yeah, if I take a picture of my food, it'll somehow just
my background,
down, right?
my background before I got involved in the vegan movement was when I was interested in Buddhist philosophy. I could get off an airplane almost anywhere in the world and meet up with someone else who was a pretty serious scholar, pretty serious specialist in Buddhist philosophy. Sometimes a layperson, sometimes a professor with a PhD, sometimes a Buddhist monk, Hong Kong, Bangkok, just all over the world. Paris, France, London, England. Wasn't hard. I got married to an anthropologist, ended in divorce. Seemed pretty easy for us to fly anywhere in the world, including like Taiwan, and meet up with other people who had some kind of passion and interest in anthropology, whether or not it was really their career. These are one-on-one meetings where, there were three of us at least, me, my ex-wife, and the person, Again, we mixed the two. I remember us meeting a professor of Buddhism on the east coast of Taiwan, my ex-wife and I. So, again, there was real seriousness of intent in all these meetings, even if they accomplished nothing. These are all people who have, or for the rest of their lives, committed to Buddhism or Asian studies or anthropology or whatever it is, right? So my expectations coming into this was that I was going to meet with people who were really serious about veganism, whether that was in Paris or Los Angeles or London or Bangkok or Hong Kong or Taiwan or Beijing, right? These are all places either I've gone or we've gone, but a lot of them.
Yes.
Or Athens, Greece, or Madrid, or New York, or, we've been so many places together, right? So, again, you and I have traveled the world together. My ex-wife and I traveled the world together. I alone traveled the world, And so, for me, that's the shocking contrast, is no. I did not meet anyone serious about the future of the vegan movement anywhere.
Yeah.
Now, I'll just add, I also didn't meet anyone serious about being an historian of the vegan movement. It may just be worth mentioning.
Yes.
Because I didn't meet anyone serious with the past or the present or the future of the vegan movement, but it's the future we're promoting. So that, for me, was the contrast. But I think that also illustrates how my attitude was profoundly different from ours. You grow up on MySpace, and then you graduate to Instagram and various forms of pornography on the internet, including pornography in which you're the one on camera. Well, let's just say, that's your kind of downward spiral.
Yes.
But my downward spiral is totally different.
Absolutely.
And that's why I'm utterly scoffing at Instagram, as if this could possibly matter to anyone.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I'm scoffing at what's going on YouTube, as if this could possibly matter to anyone. I have a very clear sense of what's real and what matters. In politics.
It is
It
is scoff-worthy.
Yes.
It is. I absolutely see the ridiculousness.
Right. And also we can have fun with it. I'm scoffing at it, but also I can joke around. A lot of my YouTube videos were humorous. Even if they're not outright parody or outright satire, there was a lot of laughter, not just tears, in what I did in YouTube in the decade, and I guess to some extent on Instagram or other platforms too. But YouTube was my primary platform, whereas uploading things now, podcasts like this one to Spotify and elsewhere. Okay, so I just say that's how I'm looking at this decade. You lived through the same decade with me.
Yes.
For most of that time, you're literally in the same room with me.
Yes.
But your perspective on the movement and your perspective on your own failure in it is, I think, in this way, totally different. I think it's true. I think I think on a kind of suppressed level, you really did have something in common with James Aspie that I didn't. Even if there are people in the audience who look at me and say, "Oh, come on, Zell, really, you're a second-rate imitation of James Aspie. Really, you and James Aspie have a lot in common." You know what I mean? Just a mentality and outlook. Yeah.
Yes. No. This is. I am telling you, you were the most intellectual person I had seen on the internet when I saw you, when I heard you, when I read your articles. I had not been reading anything at that level of just research and as one of your catchphrases, informed opinion. You were informed based on having done research and actually having been to various places. And I didn't know anybody like that. I had never, really even read an article on the level of, what I was reading from you. And so I just say, that is me admitting I was not seeing myself as an intellectual at all when I met you. Yeah. I was not seeing myself as somebody who could make a difference in the world through my writing, through my, mind. And yes, I do think I did see people like, even I know you were featuring them on your channel as a sort of, hey, if I present this and say this is ridiculous or this is bad, this is evil, this is wrong. Nevertheless, they still got a lot of attention. They got your attention. Somebody like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Yes, I mean, I understand she is a political figure that in part is famous because she's a beautiful woman. Yes, I'm, and you commented on that. You made intelligent videos talking about this corruption of politics. It is a corruption. I don't glorify it. I'm not glamorizing it like James Aspie. I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think that, I should influence the world by being on a beach vacation, making money in, scumbag ways like Bitcoin or whatever, no, I'm not saying that is how I wanted to make a difference. It's just the lack of any sense of...
But look, the question being asked about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and its applicability to the vegan movement is geometric in its simplicity. Okay? 5 years ago, you could ask, if this is the leadership in the Democrat Party of the United States, if we are being led by Ocasio-Cortez for these reasons in this way, what is going to be left of us 5 years from now? So now here we are in 2025, and you can see the ruins that are left. The Democrat Party is a fucking joke. The idealism and optimism of the Bernie Sanders period, that really is pretty much precisely 5 years ago, is now in ruins. And in case you didn't know, 5 years ago, Joe Rogan supported Bernie Sanders. Joe Rogan said he was planning to vote for Bernie Sanders. Guess who Joe Rogan supports today? Guess why? So asking that question about the leadership of AOC 5 years ago would have led to very fruitful, very crucially important analytical conclusions about where mainstream American politics was going to go in the next 5 years. 5 years ago, I was asking the question, if the identical twins, Nina and Randa, are on stage holding the microphone at this vegan event in Los Angeles, if these are the leaders of our movement, where is this movement going? What is going to be left of us 5 years from now? I asked exactly the right questions at exactly the right time. And I did it in an entertaining enough way that it was difficult to ignore.
Yes.
Because we all know if I had done this as a peer-reviewed article with footnotes, it would have been completely ignored. And instead, I was successful beyond my wildest dreams in this way. I mean, I massively disrupted the vegan movement at every level. And you have to be an insider to know that. If you think what I had to say didn't reach Wayne Seong, you are mistaken.
Yeah.
If you think Joey Carbstrong is unaware of my critique, you are mistaken. Like, you can go through the names. You think Cosmic Skeptic doesn't know my name and hasn't heard my... Oh, no. If you think Aaron Janis didn't watch every single one of my videos... No. So, no, I really did. I was massively successful to a far greater extent than I ever could have been. And obviously, I've been more influential in changing the fate of the vegan movement than I was in changing the fate of the Buddhist religion, for example. I did have some influence. I did have some impact on what was going on in Buddhist studies, kind of a topic for another podcast. And indeed, I became notorious and I became hated for that. Let's just say, obviously there were some people who thought I was brilliant, but there were a lot of people who were horrified by what I said in Buddhist studies, the same way a lot of people were horrified by what I was saying. But I say, that is the point. I'm just using Nina and Randa as one example. They are not the only example. Stefania Ferrario, there are so many names. Why is Stefania Ferrario on stage when she hasn't even been vegan for 1 year and she doesn't know anything? Why is it that this woman is the one on stage giving the lecture instead of sitting in the audience? What is happening here? And where is this going? What is going to be left of the movement 5 years from now? And the answer is nothing. The answer is it's a ruin. The answer is it's left.
Yes, the thing is I'm with you on that, and right. I can agree with you, and I'm with you on that. I don't have something to, yeah, there's no disagreement from me on that end. It's just, okay, Aizel, you're the last intellectual on Earth. You're the last person who actually is able to play that role. Sure, there are other people who might have said some sarcastic things about the movement. The cranky vegan might have been critical of James Aspie. Like Sky from Vegan Of Course might have said some, hey, let's all, have a little bit of a laugh at ourselves once in a while. Like, some people like that are smart enough, are witty enough to say something other than just,
Look.
Blind,
are we talking about the last 10 years, or are we talking about the next 10 years? In the last 10 years, the only other people who played the part of intellectual critic of the vegan movement, they were truly pseudo-intellectuals. Cosmic Skeptic is a great example. If the word pseudo-intellectual means anything, it's Cosmic Skeptic. He is pretending to be an intellectual when he's not. Did Cosmic Skeptic ever once discuss or debate any of this stuff with me, directly or indirectly? Never. Nothing of substance was ever addressed from his. It was pseudo, right? Unnatural Vegan, nickname Swayze. Unnatural Vegan, truly a pseudo intellectual. And she has made videos where, without naming me, she is responding to points I've raised, and these are truly pseudo-intellectual arguments. This is someone who is a false intellectual pretending to be an intellectual, and they do play the role of providing intellectual leadership in the movement. It's very, very bad intellectual leadership. So I just say, yeah, I do have contemporaries. I do have competition, very little, of very low caliber, and of very little sincerity. But yeah, that was the last decade. Look, the point of this podcast is to talk about the next decade. We may have to do another episode. We have to do another podcast. We can't keep the listener here indefinitely for just one recording. But I can't tell you the next decade belongs to the intellectuals. I just don't have the optimism to say, oh yes, well the last 10 years belong to bikini models and drug addicts like James Aspie and just kind of, celebrities who are celebrities for no good reason, like Nina and Randa. Their claim to fame was they were in a Taco Bell commercial advertising a meat and cheese product, and then made a YouTube video talking about what it's like to be a vegan in an ad. What? You're famous for being famous for no reason? What? And of course, their fame fled. It cannot be that Stefania Ferrario is the future of the vegan movement. But boys, what is ultimately? And again, across this whole spectrum, what do you do if you got $5 million? What do you do working in the shadows in a silent conspiracy? What now? What next? And no, you would have to be wildly optimistic to say the future belongs to intellectuals.
I understand. That is not what I was saying. Well, I don't want to be too selfish or self-centered in this, so I will kind of instead flip on its head what I was going to say. So you do not think that the future of veganism is intellectual? That means that it's open to people like Stefania Ferrario, who, she is a human being. She is not an intellectual. What does she have to offer? She is vegan. She, to some extent, cares about this. She wants to have some role in the vegan movement. Okay, Cosmic Skeptic is no longer vegan. I agree with you. He is a pseudo-intellectual,
right.
And he never was
right.
willing to, record with you. Okay, so what I was going to say is, I recognize I too was, not an intellectual. I was not able to play that role.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, even though I wasn't open about it, even though I wasn't doing OnlyFans myself, I had this, masturbatory, like pornographic, terrible, dirty secret. This is partly a sort of
vanity run amok. It's the same kind of internet vanity. Yeah,
right. At the same time, you were talking about how this is the ruination of the vegan movement. This is the ruination of politics. This is the ruination of
Western civilization.
Civilization.
Perhaps a slight exaggeration to say the downfall of Western civilization. Yeah, something like that.
Yes, but no, I mean, absolutely. Without my doing the work of which people like Durian Ryder did. I mean, he definitely worked out a lot. He definitely rode his bike a lot. I didn't do that. So yeah, I mean, I just say, my role in the vegan movement has been pathetic. But okay, so other people's role in the vegan movement has been pathetic too. I am saying, hey, Stefania Ferrario, like, hey, maybe something that maybe you being featured on à-bas-le-ciel in the past might have had a negative impact on you, but like, can't we cooperate now? Like, can't we do something together now? I'm not that smart, Stefania Ferrario. Like, why don't you talk with me? We can do something for the vegan movement. Isla is an intellectual.
We know for a fact Stefania watched à-bas-le-ciel because she left comments on the channel. I just mentioned Stefania Ferrario is among the people we know for a fact we like. We don't know how many videos she watched, but when she left comments, they were not saying, "Hey, this is the first video I've seen on this channel," and I don't think they were. So she is among the many, many people who, whether or not they would admit it, actually were impacted by the 10-year mission of à-bas-le-ciel to inform and reform the vegan movement. And, babe, maybe nobody else in this audience can get it, but it actually does click for me, the sense in which you and Stefania Ferrario have a lot in common. I think it's actually very interesting to imagine what it would have been like for you to be on stage holding a microphone at a vegan conference addressing, let's just say 100 people. I don't know how many people were in the audience, but it wasn't a huge crowd to hear her speak. But where everybody is vegan, everyone's a vegan activist, when you had only been vegan for 1 year. I think that's actually a very interesting question. Like, in that sense, what if you had some of the same experience of Stefania Ferrario, of having an unearned position of influence in the movement? Because that's exactly what you got.
Exactly. I didn't have my own YouTube channel before I met you I had worked hard to get any following, anybody, paying attention, or anybody just communicating with me. I didn't, it's not that, hey, I like à-bas-le-ciel, but I also like whatever, Unnatural Vegan. Right. I wasn't communicating with Unnatural Vegan too. No, it was just, I especially liked you. So I, reached out to you. You were the only person I'd reached out to online.
But is there any clear implication from this analysis of your own failure and the failure of the movement over 10 years for the future, for the next 10 years? I mean, the answer may just be no. But look, I remember what it was like being in Toronto, Canada in the year 1999, when the single most influential paradigm was the green anarchist. and that was the so-called anarcho-primitivist paradigm. So that was the anti-civilization paradigm in ecology. That civilization itself be turned, that the movement should be fundamentally anti-technology. That was a huge influential movement. Now, why was that so successful? Its competition was the animal rights movement that was literally fighting for rats to have the same rights as citizens. That rats have human rights too, and that it should be illegal for the city government to trap and kill rats. So when that's the competition around the year 1995 to 1999, okay, so this anarchist movement, this seems relatively intellectually sophisticated, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, that paradigm, I talked about this a million years ago on the channel. It was partly based on a glorification of First Nations people, of the Iroquois, the Ojibwe, the indigenous people of North America, also indigenous people of Australia, where it saw hunting and eating animals in that context as morally permissible, but it demonized factory farming, industrial production. So a very, very different ethical approach, ultimately based on restoring habitat and the lives of wild animals, and abolishing factory farming. Okay, so just mentioning, I've lived through several different eras, each one of which could not have predicted the next that was to come. I don't think anyone who participated in the Green Anarchist movement, which was based in Oxford, England, primarily, it was very British in some ways, but they had chapters in California and New York and that stuff, Anyone who was part of that period, if you said to them, hey, you know what, just a few years from now, this is all going to be about wearing a bikini at the beach, about being able to eat as much yummy, fresh fruit as you want and, lose weight and feel great. And, and then vice versa, the people who are part of that, the fruit luck movement, the pseudo-fruitarian movement of let's have meetups and eat a lot of fresh fruit. They wouldn't have been able to foresee, what's coming next now. Here we are again. We've got to wrap up this episode. We can do a sequel. But it is meaningful to me to hear about how you see your own personal failure in the shadow of my success, naturally. And, we're talking about my success, frankly, in the shadow of the failure of the whole movement, which really does include the failure of people like Cosmic Skeptic and people like Freely and people like Aaron Janis and people like Kristen Leo. And people like Nina and Randa. It's this long list, and whole organizations, Wayne Seong and Direct Action Everywhere and Extinction Rebellion and that same paradigm. All of this
figureheads like Gary Yourofsky or Gary Francione or Peter Singer.
But to come back to the leitmotif that opened this video, you can measure the extent of their failure in part by going back and examining what their promises were in the first place. And they were promising something all new, all different. They were promising real outcomes and real social change. The same way that, believe it or not, the leader of the Labour Party in England at the start of the New Labour movement was actually promising you something different. Tony Blair had a vision of the future, and it didn't happen. And you can't really be aware of how far you drifted away from that vision if you don't go back and examine the original constitution, so to speak, the original promises.
Right.
I did this even with BLM, so the American movement, Black Lives Matter. It was like, no, let's go back and examine their original constitution, their original promises, and then see what it actually turned into. Okay, so we're going to have to come up with the title of this. This is supposed to be examining 10 years of failure, and then looking ahead to the next 10 years, and asking what now? What next?